What if Yoda fought Anakin on Mustafar? In Revenge of the Sith, we witnessed Anakin and Obi-Wan's duel on Mustafar as well as the epic showdown between Yoda and Darth Sidious. By the end, Obi-Wan was able to slice his apprentice down, while Yoda on the other hand was forced to flee his fight from Sidious, leading him to living the rest of his life in exile. But what if things were different? What if Yoda was the one to fight Anakin on Mustafar instead of Obi-Wan? Well, in this alternate timeline, that's exactly what we'll be diving into, so let's get right into it. Our story begins moments after Yoda and Obi-Wan arrived on Coruscant and made their way through the Jedi Temple. Obi-Wan had just sent a message to any surviving Jedi that could still be around, and from there went to go check the security holograms. Just like we saw in the movie, Obi-Wan witnessed his fallen apprentice slaughter Jedi Knights, Padawans, and even younglings. However, this is where our story is different from the original. As Obi-Wan stood there, Yoda shook his head. He felt a mix of different emotions. Part of it was disappointment, part of it was sadness, but most of all, he felt sympathy for Obi-Wan. As the Grand Master of the Order, he more than anyone knew the struggles of being a teacher, but even more than that, he knew what it was like losing an apprentice to evil. Over the years, he watched Obi-Wan do everything he could to keep his promise to Qui-Gon by training Anakin and by making endless sacrifices just to be the father figure that Anakin never had. However, all those sacrifices were now just a memory, as Obi-Wan's apprentice was no longer Anakin Skywalker, but now Darth Vader. As the two stood there in shock, Yoda's comlink chimed. It was R2-D2.
R2?
R2 began to shake. The poor little droid looked terrified. As the two spoke, R2 told Yoda that he was on the planet of Mustafar with Anakin, but for some reason, Anakin told him to stay with the ship and had now been gone for hours. Originally, he was just gonna stay with the ship, but now he started to hear screaming in the distance and it began to worry him. Since he didn't want to concern Padme, that's why he contacted Yoda instead. He thought that maybe, just maybe, these two Jedi could help figure out what was going on with his best friend. Yoda nodded his head.
Thank you, R2. Come to Mustafar. Obi-Wan will see you then. He will.
He then hung up.
Master, I cannot fight Anakin. He's like my brother. I cannot do it.
Yoda closed his eyes for a brief moment and went deep in thought, almost as if he was meditating.
Agreed with you. I am. Confront young Skywalker. I will.
From there, Yoda and Obi-Wan began to come up with a plan, because from the looks of it, these two were truly the galaxy's last hope right now. So Yoda told Obi-Wan to go visit Padme's apartment and to reveal the truth to her. It was up to him to tell her what Anakin had done and to be fully open with her about everything. Since Yoda knew how relentless she was, he had no doubt that she would try to go see him herself once she learned about all the horrible things he had done. From there, Yoda would then travel to Mustafar on Padme's ship, and Obi-Wan was to stay here on Coruscant and do his best to get in contact with as many surviving Jedi as possible. However, although Yoda wasn't one to give strict orders, there was one thing he emphasized. Obi-Wan was to not confront nor get near Darth Sidious at all costs. Despite how much Obi-Wan had grown in power and wisdom, he still wasn't strong enough for him to survive a confrontation with Sidious himself. And so the two proceeded with their plan. Obi-Wan told Padme what happened with Anakin, and Padme, not believing him, went to Mustafar to confront Anakin about these claims. This time though, Yoda had already been waiting aboard her ship and was now with her on the way to the volcanic planet. The fate of the galaxy was now in his hands. It was up to him to put a stop to the Chosen One, once and for all. As Yoda hit on the ship, his comlink chimed again. This time it was Obi-Wan.
Yes, Master Kenobi.
I've begun initiating contact to see if there are any surviving Jedi, but I've heard no reply yet. Are you on board?
I am.
Master Yoda, if we don't see each other again...
Think not on after, Obi-Wan. Focus on the present. You must. And see each other soon. We will.
Obi-Wan smiled.
May the Force be with you, Master.
It is. And may the Force be with you, young Obi-Wan.
As time passed, Padme and Yoda finally arrived on Mustafar. Just as we saw, Anakin rushed out to go see Padme, and after giving her a hug, the two began to speak. However, as Yoda was waiting on the ship, he closed his eyes and began to feel the dark side growing stronger and stronger with Anakin. As the minutes passed, he only heard Anakin's voice get louder and louder from outside, and Yoda knew he couldn't waste any more time. It was now time for him to confront the young Sith Lord. So Yoda walked out with his cane, and when he did, Anakin looked over and saw the Grand Master standing in the doorway.
Master Yoda.
He then turned to Padme.
You're with him! You brought him here to kill me!
No!
Anakin then raised his hand to force choke Padme, but as he did this, Yoda quickly force pushed him back. Padme fell to the ground, so did Anakin. As Anakin picked himself back up, he stood there stunned. All he had previously felt was rage and anger, but witnessing Yoda's power, he felt something creep into him. Fear. Although he refused to admit it, he was terrified of the Jedi Grand Master.
Have you come to destroy me, Master Yoda?
Yoda shook his head.
The dark side I sense in you, young Skywalker.
Anakin took off his robes.
My new powers are beyond what you could dream of. Soon, this empire will be mine, and you won't be around to see it.
So sure you are, hmm?
Yoda sighed.
Much to learn you still have.
Yoda then dropped his cane to the floor and then ignited his saber. Anakin did the same. Then he performed the backflip to attack Yoda and the two began the duel. It was now a battle for the future of the galaxy between the Chosen One and the Jedi Grand Master. As the two clashed lightsabers, they started moving their way along the bridge. Anakin, who was trying to dominate with two-handed strikes, found himself overwhelmed by Yoda, who kept leaping from side to side on the walls, using his small size to his advantage. This shocked Anakin because for years he's always watched Yoda duel from a distance, but actually going up against it himself was a different story. In a way, it began to frustrate him because he was only getting more and more furious that he couldn't land a blow on him yet. Now, this was typical from somebody who used a lightsaber combat form that Anakin did. He used what was called Form 5, or also known as Gem So, and this form focused all on using powerful strikes and trying to violently end fights as quickly as possible. However, Yoda on the other hand was a master of Form 4, or also known as Ataru. Ataru focused all on being acrobatic and overwhelming enemies with quickness and speed. Unfortunately though, there was one issue to this form. Because it focused on acrobatics and always moving, it usually made the user tired pretty quickly, so Yoda knew he couldn't prolong this fight and would have to end it as soon as possible. Meanwhile, as the two were dueling, Sidious was sitting in his office when all of a sudden he felt a disturbance in the Force. Palpatine said to himself,
I sense Lord Vader is in danger.
He then ordered his troopers to prepare his shuttle so that if he could make it to Mustafar in time, he could help assist his newly appointed apprentice. As time passed, Yoda and Anakin then reached the lava river, with each of them landing on their own pods, keeping a small amount of distance between each other. This was good for Yoda because it finally gave him a second to breathe while also collecting his thoughts. However, as the two locked eyes on one another, Anakin started to grow impatient. He started to remember when he was just a boy and how he met Yoda for the first time. He remembered the rush of excitement he had that day just to see a new planet for the first time and to start his life as a Jedi, only to be told by Yoda himself that he sensed the worst in him. For years, Yoda and the rest of the council made him feel like an outcast, like he didn't belong there, and it wasn't until he met Palpatine where he truly felt valued for once. Anakin's thoughts began to consume him. He became more and more enraged.
Come to this, it didn't have to, young Skywalker.
Enough! You and your Jedi Order have rejected me from the start. Now, I am more powerful than any Jedi. Even you.
As Anakin said this, he then went in to attack him, but then Yoda leaped in the air. Before Anakin knew it, he saw a flash of green right above his head, and then, with one swift strike of his saber, Yoda had landed behind Anakin and stabbed him right through his chest. It was over. The Chosen One was defeated. Anakin Skywalker was dead. As Anakin's body fell down into the lava, Yoda then retracted his lightsaber and jumped over to the nearby hill. As he stood there, he took a moment and let out a big sigh. He started to think about his teachings that he stressed so much upon throughout his 900 years of living and how pain always leads to a life of suffering. Unfortunately, young Skywalker went down that exact path, and sadly, it dominated his destiny. However, before he could keep thinking about this, he saw a silver flash of metal right above him. It was Palpatine's shuttle. It was too late. He had nowhere to go, so Yoda quickly pulled out his comlink.
R2, bring Senator Amidala to the ship you must. If back in time I am not, leave without me.
R2 beeped. As Yoda stood on the hill, Palpatine and his two clones then approached him. The clones raised their blasters.
Troopers, stand down. I will deal with this Jedi myself.
But sir, he's a traitor.
Palpatine force-choked both clones, and before they knew it, their bodies dropped to the ground. They were both dead.
Expendable. At an end, your rule is, Darth Sidious. Failed you have as an emperor, and failed you have as a master.
Normally, Sidious would laugh at a comment like this, but because he had already sensed what Yoda had done, he was furious. For over a decade, he had his eyes on Anakin and was destined to rule the galaxy side by side with him. But now this dream was robbed from him, all because of this disgusting Jedi. Sidious was enraged. He had no other option left but to take matters into his own hands now.
You, just like the rest of your pathetic Jedi Yoda, will watch this galaxy burn, Master Yoda. Fight me, but just know this war is already over, foolish Jedi!
Yoda ignited his green saber once again. He wasn't sure how long he'd be able to last. Fatigue was already kicking in, but he refused to go down without a fight. Sidious then also ignited his saber and leaped towards the Jedi Grand Master. The two then clashed back and forth on the hill, with Yoda barely able to move as quickly as he did earlier. Each time Yoda went to attack, Sidious had a counter. Their blade-to-blade combat went back and forth, with none of them able to get an edge over one another. Yoda quickly knew he couldn't keep going on like this. Fatigue would get the better of him eventually. However, then he remembered something. Padme. If she had survived, she would need his help right now more than ever. So, Yoda then resorted to a new plan, and this time, his goal was to lure the fight back closer to the ship so he could flee and rush her to safety. He knew that he wasn't in the shape or condition to fight Sidious with his full strength, and if he died right there and then, any hope for the future of the galaxy would be shattered. One day, a new hope will emerge, but for now, he had to come to terms that the Empire had won. This fight was over. As Yoda then brought the duel closer to the ship, he then did a backflip and force-pushed Sidious to the ground. This was now his small chance to escape. To take advantage of the Emperor on the floor, Yoda then leaped on the Padme ship and told 3PO to take off right away. As he did this, Sidious retracted his lightsaber and started cackling as he watched Yoda take off.
Go ahead, Master Yoda. Flee! Flee like the coward that you are! But just know you will never match the power of the dark side! The Sith now rule the galaxy!
As the ship then took off, Yoda walked in to check to see if Padme was okay. Thankfully, she was still breathing, but as Yoda stood by her side, she said,
"Is Anakin alright?"
She had no idea what happened, and Yoda wasn't sure when he'd tell her the truth. As Yoda sat in the ship, he pulled out his comlink and contacted Obi-Wan.
Master Kenobi, meet me on Polis Massa, you must. In critical condition, Senator Amidala is.
What about Anakin? Where is he?
Yoda sighed.
Speak to you. I will, when I see you.
Eventually, Yoda arrived with Padme at the medical facility on Polis Massa, the same one we saw in the film. While she was being treated, Yoda broke the news to Obi-Wan. He told him what happened and that unfortunately, Anakin left him with no choice. When Obi-Wan heard this, tears ran down his cheek. This was news he never thought he'd ever hear, and after losing all the people he loved most in his life, he never thought that he'd lose his best friend too. He was heartbroken. However, before he could keep thinking about it, Padme started screaming. She was giving birth. It was right there and then where she brought 2 children into the world, and their names were Luke and Leia. Sadly, all she had was the memory of Anakin trying to kill her back on Mustafar, and even though Yoda hadn't said a word, she knew exactly in her heart what happened to the man she once loved. She knew that if Yoda of all people couldn't bring Anakin back from the dark side, then he truly was gone. In her final moments, Padme shed a tear, and as she looked at the 2 Jedi in front of her, she said,
"Luke, Leia, don't let them make the same mistake as Anakin."
Padme was now gone. It was now up to Obi-Wan and Yoda to protect and look after her children. As Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Bail Organa sat together, they started planning out their next steps. Unfortunately, while Yoda was on Mustafar, Obi-Wan tried his best to reach out to any Jedi that survived, but sadly didn't hear back from anybody. However, both Yoda and Obi-Wan agreed that they wouldn't stop trying here and that if there were any survivors still around, they'd do whatever it took to find them. Since Sidious no longer had an apprentice, they believed their chances against this empire were higher, but it still wasn't the right time and won't be for a while. In order to make this happen, they knew they had to rally more to their cause, but even more than that, they also had to prepare the next generation. Both Obi-Wan and Yoda agreed that when the time was right, they would each train Luke and Leia in the ways of the Force when they reached the right age. Obi-Wan took it upon himself to take Luke and watch over him, while Yoda agreed to take Leia and watch over her. Both children would be trained as they grew up, but this time, trained in the right way. With the help of each other, they had all the right people they needed to make this happen, and with time and patience, peace and justice would eventually be restored to the galaxy. As Palpatine returned back to his office, he was deep in thought. He couldn't shake the feeling of losing Lord Vader, and it would be a while before he found somebody even close to the power that he had. However, until that day comes, he would find a new placeholder, just as he'd done countless times before.
Gods, tell Captain Kargi to prepare my shuttle, and tell him to set a course for Dathomir.
As Palpatine arrived on the planet of Dathomir, he approached a cave where a shadowy figure sat in front of him.
You. Why are you here? Has your pathetic empire crumbled already?
Lord Maul, I am here to present you with an opportunity.
After what you did to my brother, to my mother, you.
Maul had enough. He couldn't stand the sight of his old master, after what he did to him, after what he was responsible for. So he then turned around and leaped towards Sidious.
Young fool. You should know by now that treachery is the way of the Sith. I know what you seek, Lord Maul. Your thirst for power, your hunger for control, and most of all, revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi. Join me, and you will have everything it is you seek.
What could possibly have happened that has led you now back to me? Did you lose your loyal pupil? Skywalker, was it?
I give you one final chance. Join me, or die.